We're gonna enjoy today the story behind the fantastic show in the suburbs of Milan, Villa Arconati. This incredible, huge, tremendous project was realized by two people, Angela Lin, the artist, and her curator, Li Changhua.
It's quite a trip for me to watch this film today. I was just in the villa this morning for an interview. My breath was taken away a bit that I'm actually going to pack up everything. I moved into this villa as if it was my house. I realized today that it's almost over, so Sunday will be the last day, and to see the film now is kind of close the circle, so yeah. And part of the unleashing, of course, had to do with this man here standing next to me.
And where did you do all these works?
This is the view from my studio window. I moved to Ticino in 1994, and I'd never really known where home was. Being biracial, I was born in England, and I didn't really feel at home where I was born. And then I lived in the United States, and I didn't think I belonged there. Then I lived 17 years in the German part of Switzerland, and I wasn't sure that I belonged there. And by chance, life brought me to the Ticino, and suddenly the greens in the Ticino had this amazing blueness to them. And it was this blueness that kind of unleashed a lot of imagination and memory for me. Last but not least, connected me to the Chinese art that I had grown up with. And as the film says, I knew I was an artist since I'm a very small girl. And so I suddenly started to think, this is home. But mostly it has to do with my studio, where it's all about digging into what I don't know, basically. And that's for me what art is about, exploring what you don't know.
So, Angela, you've been an artist for decades. What role does art play in your life?
Well, it's been my way to navigate time and to express something and find something out that I don't manage to express with the same precision in any other form. And I think an artist has to be driven by some sense of urgency in order to really pursue art for a lifetime. There must be some necessity there. This is a 9-meter cedar painting that I did in 2015 that was based on the cedar trees outside my windows that have become a kind of a map or a scaffolding on which I build my ideas and my thoughts, basically about life, about relation between different things, tensions and openings, possibilities.
In the film, and also more stories we can find in the book, are about your being raised in England, of being half Chinese, half English. How did this aspect influence your art?
Definitely growing up, when I grew up with Eastern and Western culture, it was still quite rare. And the complexity of these different cultures, I grew up with realizing this very slow process. And I think that today these things are very oversimplified. The mixing between East and Western culture under the label global is underestimated, the complexity of that. And one of the main things was that I had two aspects. As Lee said, he saw my art and he said, well, it looks a bit Chinese. And the Western view to my work, well, it's sort of, it looks a bit, but it was never quite one thing or the other. And that was a huge problem for me growing up as a young artist, because people didn't know what to do with this mixture of information. And it was only actually later when China opened up that the Chinese aspect in my work was suddenly found to be interesting. Before that, the sort of search for balance in color, a certain appreciation of beauty as a powerful tool that I grew up with Chinese culture, was considered decorative and sort of sub-intelligent even to some extent. And I wrestled with that when I was young, because I always had a hang for a certain resonance in color. And later, when China opened up, there became another interest, especially in contemporary art, there was a new interest in what I was doing and a curiosity also how I was combining these languages. Yes.
Yeah. So all your background and your stories manifested in this great project on the edge of time. How did you land up being in Baroque Villa with 25 rooms?
Well, I had a large work in the museum in Lugano, and the owner of the villa, who is the head of the Augusto Rancilio Foundation, that has its seat in the villa, he saw my work and invited me to if I would like to do something. And he showed me, when I arrived and I saw this immense space, I thought, God, I was completely blown over, and this idyllic, strange place. You see in the background there, the Milan, you have this strange contrast. It's like a mirage of something in the middle of this metropolitan air of Milan. You come across this sort of dream-like place. So he offered me to do an exhibition in the wing where they do exhibitions, which was 6 rooms. And I saw the 6 rooms, but then I saw the rest of the villa, and I said, I would have an idea for a project if he would be interested to hear my idea. And he said, sure. So I went away and came back some weeks later with a project with 150 slides in it, and was determined that I would not miss this opportunity. And Chris from Chambers Fine Art, it was at that point he saw my project. He said, this is the project of a lifetime, you need a curator. And that's when he brought Lee into my life.
Lee, and what made it you to join this project? What was your aim with this project?
My aim, actually, once I have to talk to a Chinese media, like to actually reflect on Angela's issue. Angela's issue is very particular. If we talk about overseas Chinese, overseas Chinese, they have a very interesting history that Chinese people traveled all the way, to America, to Europe, and to other countries in the 19th centuries, and even before that, for trading, for other things. Then I think, what I can find, what I can really search for, with this kind of interest, I saw Angela's work. Then I think, yeah, it's interesting of actually thinking about, the second generation of Chinese person, living this so-called Western culture and developing their work, but still having this kind of Chinese touch. But what is the Chinese touch? So for me, I'm really fascinated by in this so-called huge transformation of culture. And then I think, yeah, so maybe this is something. I remember recently also I had a discussion with somebody. They said, after Baroque Rococo, there's a new classic moment. I said, yeah, but in a way, even Baroque Rococo, they're expanded. It's not only like in Europe, but Baroque Rococo also goes in Asia, if you know the history as well. So I just think there I find this is so fascinating that Angela trying to find her root in China. In another sense, it's like her root, it is part of China, part of this kind of so-called great Chinese, the great culture. But on the other hand, she has her own task, own approach in her own art. With all this background information that I try to bring in, or I try to cut in with this perspective and of understanding, that I think this is how I try to find a way to look at the artist. Also, I try to find a way to work with artists.
And Angela, what is your feeling? What did Denhua and adapt to this project?
I just like to backtrack a little bit that our approach was to the main goal that, and this grew very much out of the conversation with Lee. He said something that I really liked. He said, without human stories, the villa is just cold, empty rooms. And that was the beginning when I thought, I can work with you together. And the first room that I named was Door to the River, and Lee particularly liked this name. And from there, we built this narrative that moved through the 25 rooms, somewhere based on the villa itself and the actual logistics of the space, and in other places based on ideas that I wanted to bring out, sort of using the villa as a stage set. This painting is called The Emigrant, and it is a painting I did in 2012 of a small man on a little boat. And he actually does not look where the boat's going, and the boat is carrying him. He sits on the back drinking tea. I think the spirit of this painting was very much what Lee unleashed in me, that he just said he was sort of riding on the back of my boat, not looking where the boat goes, drinking tea, saying, let it go, let it sail. And that was challenging and fantastic for me at the same time, because he really took away my boundaries, and on this huge project basically just said, go for it, let your boat sail. And I did. So maybe just quickly to the rooms. One of the things that was most fascinating for me to work in a Baroque palace was that it's full already. The place is full of frescoes, of decorations and history. So it's the complete antithesis of the white cube space that we've been used to working in the last decades. I found it incredibly inspiring and freeing, paradoxically enough. What happened was, it became very clear to me there was one rule. I had to listen to the space and work with the space and sort of ride with what is already there. The minute I didn't listen to the space, it was terrible. The works were completely eaten alive. This is perhaps my most favorite example of this dialogue with what is given in the space. I had planned an installation to remember the ancestors, which is a Chinese tradition to make paper slippers for the sweeping of the tombs ceremony. That you make paper slippers and burn them to remember the ancestors. So I made 600 slippers from painter's canvas, and with the idea it was going to be a river sort of rushing through this ballroom, also recalling the people who have danced there. And when I started to put this rush of slippers all over the floor, the room was just like, get out of here, this is not work. This does nothing to do with this room. And I had to slow down and wait until the room really kind of told me what is the circulation of space in there. And slowly I came up with this shape that just really was quite a meditation and a mandala, echoing the movement in the ceiling and in all the decorations. In the end, the room turned out very harmonious. This room here was a room I called the sanctuary. So in many places where there were frescoes, like for example in this room there were frescoes of pastoral landscapes, sort of dreamy places. And in one of them there were birds flying in the sky. I had worked on a series of paintings with landscapes and birds 2 years before. And so I moved in in the same spirit, but in a contemporary sense. This was the idea, how to align the past and the present. This is the room next to this room with the pastoral scenes that was full of scenes of journeys on the ocean. And in 2019, I did an exhibition with Fabian Walter in Zurich, based on an experience I had on the Gempten, looking out over the Jura. And I imagined that the whole landscape filled slowly with water. I'm very interested in the subconscious impact that climate change is having on us, and not from a political point of view as much, really from a subjective and human point of view. So the view of this flood slowly rising was very impactful, and it launched a whole series of paintings called In the Blue, in which I talked about I would make a boat and invite you to sit beside me to look out. So actually I did make a boat for this room to go with the room and the boats. And Lee, you can tell a story about that, Lee, here we go. Lee insisted that the boat has to go on the lake. You cannot just make a boat and not put it in the water. So maybe you can tell us about that, Lee, what happened.
Yeah, well, I saw this boat, the size of the boat is like exactly at the height of Angela. No? So that's how I understand. The boat was staying there inside the studio of Angela. Then I thought, okay, this boat have to go into the water to complete. Because if it's a boat, if you call it a boat, the boat have touched the water, then the whole concept complete. And there, we developed this idea of actually making, Angela wanted to do a performance, and we wanted the boat to go into the lake, and then we filmed everything, and then even we did it twice, because there are some other shots we need to do. But then I think everything somehow goes with the raft, because Angela call it a raft. I just think with the idea of the raft, everybody somehow got liberated.
Yeah, there was definitely a liberation.
Yeah.
I'd like to show you quickly this room. When I was in the Rierberg Museum, they had an amazing shamana coat there, and I thought this coat was just the most precious garment I could imagine. It was so full of stories and meaning, and today's vast consumption and speed of using and getting rid of, and I thought this coat, if you had that coat, that would do you for at least 10 lifetimes. So during the course of my work, when I'm painting, I always clean the brush on myself, probably out of a certain impatience to clean it somewhere else. And over time, these rags have started to become part of something that I recognize as being processed and being belonging, having a sense of belonging to the paintings. So this room in the villa, I called it the ghost room. I grew up, my father told me that there was a ghost in Gulangyu where he grew up. And my father was a scientist, a research engineer, but he said he's seen the ghost. So I grew up with the ghost, which is part of life and so on. And then when I came to Villa Arconati, Mr. Rancilio told me there are also ghosts in Arconati. So I made these two ghosts, which also kind of talks about my own duality, but I wondered if the ghosts of Arconati and the ghosts of Gulangyu would meet in my exhibition. And so I prepared this room for them with all what I call my fake voodoo, with all the bits and pieces, the processes of my work in there. The first painting I loved and I grew up with was a cedar tree with a monkey in it. And monkeys have become part of my, I'd say, my language or my narrative. And the first monkey I painted was a natural monkey. He was on the very first slide. And then there was a blue monkey that's kind of observing. This monkey is really on the edge of time. He is very worried about what we're doing at the moment on this planet. This is an example also how I responded to the space in terms of creating reflection also on the future. This wing was the women's wing where women would spend time with their children. There was a direct passage to the church as well. And the atmosphere in this wing of the villa is very different from the other parts. It's less representational and it's just frescoes of windows and one window that is painted open in the poetry room. So my question was, how can I relate to this women's wing and how can I think about how I connect with women over 400 years? So I came up with this sentence, this is the Italian version, it's English from the other way. She woke early, hoping things would be all right. You never know nowadays, she was thinking to herself. Maybe a month after I hung this installation, the war in the Ukraine broke out. And behind this installation is a remembrance, like an altar to a huge explosion that happened during the First World War where there are women and children were making weapons in a factory that blew up. So I really felt that this connection was timeless and universal, that women will always worry about what the future will be like for their kids. So this was my way of making this space a current space and not just a historical building.
Wow, Angela, thank you. And why is this title, Angela Lean on the Edge of Time?
So for me, it was a great opportunity to look back to some degree of what I've done as a young artist and where I am now and where I might be heading. That's from my own perspective. But of course, I feel that we are in a moment that is on the edge of time. The fact that we have, there are no places to escape this edge on the globe. So there are certain things we are going to have to face. And that's where I felt like this was a title that captures the history of the building, but also looks towards the future of what we're facing.
Great. You also have published a major book, like a major publication. You can see it behind. Lee, you have made a major contribution to this book. You always pushed Angela to write more. Can you explain why you did that?
Yeah, because Angela always tells me a lot, you know, from the beginning. I mean, she would ask me to join her in Lugano, and we probably would spend like 2 days and just like talking. And then, or we on phones. You know, sometimes Angela feel like she want to talk to me. Then I realized, you know, all these stories or her, how you call it, reflections on certain kind of things need to be documented. So then I said, you know, Angela, maybe you should write them down. I mean, for me, a lot of their sentences are very, how you call it, we cannot even put them together. It's like a constellation of certain kind of thoughts. And then I do think, you know, maybe when Angela write it down, then everything can be somehow related to each other and together as a concept, as a real story, as a real piece of a text. But then I think, you know, maybe this is part of Angela as well, you know, the way she expresses herself in her art, in telephone, in writing, in you know, like in her action, you know, like all together. This is her. So that's just the way, you know, we have to work it out with a certain kind of medium, which is like on hold of everything. So then I came up with this idea of actually, you know, at the beginning we thought maybe we do another catalog, but then I thought no, we don't need another catalog. We need another book.
I'd like to add to that. I would tell the story differently. I said, maybe we're going to have a book, maybe like 80, 100 pages. And you said, oh, minimum 300. I will never forget that.
Oh, it's not me. It's your husband. Yeah. Thomas said, actually, I remember, Thomas said, oh no, we can only do a book within 120 pages. And I said, what? You know, we're doing such a huge show, and the work is already more than 120 pieces. And then how can you include everything into the book? I mean, apart from that, also, I read everything from Angela. You know, when I asked, you know, I need to do this research to understand who is Angela and what she have done before. So I read everything, and then I thought, no, this is, I mean, she need some kind of thing that could tell people her personal story and her artistic development and the scene of our show all together, all at once.
Angela, please tell us about the structure of the book.
Well, it went back, so there's a historical part, a biographical part that goes back to my where I was born, and then this is my great-grandfather. He had 6 wives, and so this was the kind of oddness that I grew up with. It was quite normal in my family that my great-grandfather had 6 wives, and this is my grandma and my grandpa. Then later my grandpa, he went to study in England. So it was a very visionary family that were traveling from already way back in the early 20s. And I carried this, my father left in 1947 and carried this heavy weight of missing his homeland. And so this kind of just was carried, I carried this feeling of the homeland. And people here who know Asian culture, it was deep in the traditional Chinese culture, you have to bring something back to the homeland. So I always have the feeling I have to bring something back to homeland and even really know where the homeland was. The grasshopper there, they say when a grasshopper comes to you, it's an ancestor coming to visit you. And he actually came several times. This is a part of the biographical part of the book. It's the story of feet has always been a major theme in my work. When I was a little girl, I received a lot of gifts of these beautiful small Chinese embroidered slippers, and they never fit me because I have English feet. And so the story, my grandmother also had her feet bound when she was a young girl. Fortunately, they stopped before her feet were completely ruined. This is a pair of bronze lotus slippers that I made that are quite lethal and heavy and pointed. So that's just to show how deep the cultural influences walk inside us. Later, the book goes on to talk about my approach as an artist, what it means to me to paint, and about the aspect of time as a means of expression. That's very much why I paint in the digital age, the time. And then the third part of the book is called Rooms. There are small poetic texts that go with each room with the name of the room. And so you see the works individually. This is the hunting room. This was a room where the people were eating, and when it was the hunting season, the whole area from all the way from Milan down to Como was owned by this family, and it was their hunting grounds. And another good example of how I sort of tried to bring this subject to reflect on the future, it's an installation that is embroidered placemats that say, will there be enough? And the drive for humans to hunt, as in, you can't see it really very well in this slide, but these extremely vicious dogs with their drive to hunt. And my question was, you know, how far and for how long can we hunt? Will there be enough?
In our conversations with Angela, she mentioned authenticity as a key word, and she said that you related to her work as authentic. Can you explain us maybe what you saw as authentic in Angela's work and her doings?
For my understanding, that every artist is unique. So every artist would give something from their own narration, their own cultural background, their own energy, and other elements. So then there, I see Angela unique. But in another sense, I do think, you know, there's a uniqueness is actually that she tried to combine this kind of imagery idea of Chinese painting and integrate it in her education outside of China. So for me, there, you know, this process might take longer than we thought to really like taking the effect. Because there, I didn't share from the beginning that I'm interested also in this, as I said, the transformation. You know, each transformation will take much longer than you think. You know, from one culture to another, and travel hundreds of years, and then to end in a certain form. So I see there the uniqueness of in the process of something.
And how was your journey with Angela on the edge of time?
Well, we're still traveling. Yeah. Yeah.
And for you, Angela?
I felt that we were able to question each other in a very real way, and I appreciated that very much. I think the journey we made was a very authentic one, and it was not it was a real one. So I'm very grateful for the steps we made together, and I think we're still on a journey as well.
And your boat, where does it take you to?
Well, my boat is my boat has already transformed. After this extremely opulent exhibition with over 150 works in 25 rooms, the next vision that came to my mind was downsize, and after the edge of time, what comes after the edge of time? And I came up with the title Passage in the Wake of the World, where it cannot be the same anymore. And so I will have an exhibition in New York in May, which will be one crate, and everything I will show has to fit into that crate. And the crate will also turn into a boat as an installation inside the exhibition. So I'm very excited. I will do that with Chambers, and I hope Lee will come and check that it floats.
Sure. We need to fill in more water in the gallery, yeah. Yeah.
Or you let it swim in Hudson
Well,
River.
whatever, whatever. Yeah.
Maybe I can share the little text that goes. This is the last painting in the exhibition. It's the runner. And there's a small text that says, "The runner runs in the midday heat, brings some oil to warm his feet."
Well, thank you so much for this talk.
Thank you, Julia.
And,
Thank you, Julia.
Thank you so much. And I'm wishing you a beautiful journey on the way to New York and in your many, many projects which we carry. Thank you.